Hey everybody, welcome to our Tuesday training. Now, today's training is very nichey. So I get it if you are not a supervisor, you are probably not interested in a remediation plan. But let me pique your interest a little bit. If you're a graduate student and you're thinking, what is this remediation plan she's speaking of? Or if you're an associate and you're like, I've never had a remediation plan, or could my supervisor give me a remediation plan? Or you're thinking about becoming a supervisor and you're thinking, okay, I really want to protect my license. I really don't want to go down in flames because of one of my supervisee's mistakes. All of those things can make learning about a remediation plan super interesting. Okay, probably not as interesting as UT beating Alabama this week, but still super interesting. So I'm going to go over that today, how to do a remediation plan. And I'm going to talk about a process called the OER triad, the OER triad. This is a best practices for supervisors. So you're going to get the picture of how to do remediation. If you're in the Texas Supervisor Coalition, you have access to this. We put a lot of documents in the Texas Supervisor Coalition. Also, if you're in the Step It Up membership already, which if you're watching this, you should be, or if you're listening to this on a replay or the podcast, you can always get in on that. And I'll tell you more about that later. But you guys have access to all of this because, hey, you're a lucky Step It Upper. And that's what we do for you guys. We make sure that you have all the paperwork that you need along with the CEs and trainings like this. So if you're watching me live, awesome. I will keep checking over here for questions. If you are joining me on a replay, then bless you because you are taking time out of your busy day to listen to this training, either on the treadmill or you're sitting at your computer. You do you. I'm just glad you're here. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I am talking about when I say talking slowly so that I can get everything ready. All right. So here is your orientation, remediation, termination. So remediation is a process by which your supervisor tells or teaches or reteaches, hopefully, a concept to a supervisee. Now, we didn't invent the word remediation. Remediation is used from industries where they, oil and gas, we're going to remediate this process, we're going to remediate this pipeline, we're going to remediate this person. So this is definitely not, just the clinical supervision arena. But what makes this word important is that it appears in the LPC rules. Now, not everything appears in the rules. So when we find a word that's literally written in the rules, we've got to pay attention, right? So when it's in the rules, we know there are consequences. We know that investigations and complaints can happen. If it's not in the rules, that's when we talk about best practices in groups like Texas Supervisor Coalition, Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, the podcast, Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, your regional networking group. I see so many of you guys in the DFW consulting groups, the El Paso consulting groups. You have so many wonderful people around you to consult with, and that's how we get together and create best practices when there's no rule. Okay, having said all of that, put it aside because we literally have a rule for this. In LPC and LMFT rules, it states if you're a supervisor, you must remediate or document a remediation plan before you terminate your supervisee. Now, if your supervisee is doing something egregious, right, fill in the blank. What kind of things could be egregious? Things where the client is in imminent harm, things where the client is in imminent harm, right? If you're a supervisor and you're listening to this and you're doing something egregious and thinking, well, my supervisor's just going to remediate me. Yeah, no, think again. Not only are they going to fire you, they're going to report you to the board, right? So as supervisors, we know that our supervisees, especially our level 1 supervisees, are going to do things because they lack experience, they lack knowledge, they just got the job, they're new to the business. So we have a process where it starts with an orientation. This is a teachable moment when you are entering a new supervision practice, right? Your supervisor is going to teach you things like, okay, this is how I want you to contact me in case of an emergency. Here's how we are going to process payments together. Here's how you're going to reschedule if you have to miss a supervision. So orientation is going to take you through the process of teaching you how your supervisor does supervision. Now, if you have concepts that you don't know, so if you're going with a supervisor who's a couples specialist and you are not a couples person yet, but you hope to be, this is where the supervisor will teach you things about couples, maybe how to work with couples surviving infidelity or working with couples where one partner is suffering with addiction. Okay, so you got orientation. That's when we teach it, because evaluation happens periodically, at least it should. With a good supervision experience, you will have regular formal evaluation because you got to know how you're doing, right? Are you meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, failing to meet expectations? Well, I don't know who says it, I say it. You can't evaluate it if you never taught it. So the orientation is your way. Now I'm talking to you supervisors. It's your way to make sure you are teaching, right? The initial teaching moment for your supervisee. Because if you go to evaluate them and they don't meet expectations, but you've never taught it, well, that's on you, supervisor. Okay, so we have orientation, teach it. Evaluation, we're going to check to see if they understand the material that you have taught them. Now, here's where remediation comes in, because remediation happens when you are, when you have to reteach something and reteach something and reteach something. Or perhaps you notice some troublesome behaviors on the part of your supervisee, right? They're not quite getting the ethics behind good boundaries. Or perhaps they're just asking the same questions over and over and over again. Or you notice that they're not completing documentation in a quality or a timely manner. So those types of things, you go back and you go to the orientation, you think, okay, did I teach that? Yeah, you taught it. Evaluation, did I evaluate it? Well, yeah, they're not meeting expectations. So this is the second evaluation where they're still not meeting expectations. Well, now this is leaving you open to liability, right? And that's what this is all about, protecting your license and protecting the clients. So remediation starts with a plan. Now, here's the plan that Dr. Judy Detrude and I created years ago. This was in response to a real life situation that I had with a supervisee who wouldn't do the things, right? So I would say, hey, you really should not meet your clients in a public location. Yeah, I'll remember that. You really shouldn't get your client a job. Oh, yeah, it was just this one time. Well, I was a new supervisor and I was inexperienced and I didn't really know a lot about remediation. So after that, that was blah, my head, I still kind of have trauma from that. You have to, so we developed the remediation plan. So let's take a look at this. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, you know I'm going to walk you through this. So this is a piece of paper. This is a formal document because remember the rule says documenting the remediation plan is the important part, right? We want to make sure that this is a formal written document. So let's take a look. We've got the date. This is the date you will confront your supervisee. You will introduce the idea of remediation. We have the supervisee's name. And then there's a big box for the issue. Now, I did this on a Word document because you may need a little bit more room than this. You know, I know that some forms will say use the back of the page if needed, or use another sheet of paper if needed. Well, I just made a big box. So however you do you, just make sure you are very detailed about what's going on here. Now, if you have been in any of my classes before, you know I talk about, you know, you can't remediate, this person just bugs me. Or you can't remediate, I just get irritated when they're in the room. This is when you really need to have honed your specific, measurable, trackable, realistic, all of those SMART goals, right? Because these behaviors need to be observable. If they are breaking a rule or in danger of breaking a rule, you put the rule here, you put the code here. You be very, very specific about what they're doing, how often they're doing it, how you have taught them and re-taught them. Document that they had an orientation, document that they failed to meet expectations on a previous evaluation. Because remember, you can't remediate it if you haven't evaluated it, unless two things: they are so freaking brand new, they haven't even had a chance to have an evaluation yet, right? Or number two, it's egregious and we're just going to skip this whole process anyway. All right, so the initial remediation, that's what we're going to talk about first. Now, my remediation plan includes a strike 2. So this is the strike 1, if you will. So the initial remediation, I'm looking at 4 boxes. And so there's room to list 4 specific activities. One of the biggest problems that I see with remediation when I'm consulting with supervisors is they say, okay, you know what, you're late to your client session. So the first thing on your remediation plan is don't be late anymore. Okay, that's a true thing, but that's actually an outcome of the remediation plan, right? We want a new supervisee who no longer shows up late to sessions. So how are you going to drive that home? Well, you're going to tell them to attend a 3 CE course on the ethics behind being on time. You're going to have them write a paper on why it's important to be on time. You're going to have them perhaps look at old video, a YouTube video of a previous board hearing where maybe someone well, I know the complaints hearings aren't open anymore, but you could have your supervisee download the board minutes where you can see the public documents for folks who are doing things that are getting them in trouble. The idea, though, is to have an assignment with the beginning and a middle and an end, so that here in next to the big box where you're listing this, you can have a completion date, which it's great if you want to collaborate with your supervisee and say, okay, I know you're busy. How does 3 weeks sound? Well, 3 weeks is still, I need a little bit more time. Okay, let's do 4 weeks. So we type in, you're going to have this done, let's see, October 12th. And what's the assignment? And for those of you who are listening, I'm just typing in, write a paper about being on time. Is this, and then you have a box for check, was it completed, or minus, no, it was not. So come up with 3 or 4 of these, enough for your supervisee to understand the seriousness of what's happening. Y'all, a remediation plan is serious. It means you're kind of one step away from termination. So you need to take this seriously. And if what I'm assigning you is cramping your style a little bit, supervisee, then we may not be a good fit, right? That's also kind of that whole, you know what, it's not you, it's me, or it's not me, it's you. The remediation plan really puts into concrete your expectations for an excellent supervisee who will become an excellent practitioner. So if you're listening, optional additional remediation plan, this is your strike two. So if your supervisee does not complete the initial remediation, yeah, include something else, or perhaps they completed it, but you're just not confident that they have the concept yet that you're trying to reteach. Well, put in an additional assignment here. Now, the verbiage for the final part of the agreement, this is for me, right? If you want to go in and find a remediation plan and put something in that's a little less harsh, you do you, but this is for me. I say, I understand I must, and this is the supervisee's voice, I understand I must complete the initial and additional remediation / follow-up plan set forth by my supervisor, and my failure to do so will be grounds for termination of the supervisory relationship, possible termination of my contract employment, because if in Texas, if you're not supervised, you cannot see clients. Like there's no grace period, no supervision, no clients, and notification of the appropriate licensing board of my activities. Now, this doesn't mean you can't report your supervisee. Of course you can. But if your supervisee fails remediation, you might want to let the board know and say, hey, this person's on real thin ice here. I mean, that's really up to you, depending on the severity of what they're struggling with. I mean, if they're just struggling with anxiety, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's not quite as serious. That may just be between you and, their site supervisor, whoever you want to discuss that with. But if it's something serious and you're giving this person a chance to get their act together, and they're just not able to, then you might want to consider letting the board know. Just as a rule, or in the rules, it mentions nothing about having to file this remediation plan with the board, right? It simply says the remediation plan must be documented if you feel your supervisee doesn't have the skills to do their job. So before you terminate, you must remediate. So then I get my supervisee's signature, and of course my signature, and I make a copy. I give one to the supervisee, I keep one, it goes into their file, and we schedule our next meeting. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do for a remediation plan, including make them come to more supervision at their expense. This is, like I said, this is serious, and it has to be something that you have taught before and you have evaluated before, unless it's egregious or it's such a spanking new, brand new level 1 newbie supervisee that you just haven't had time to evaluate it. So that's even more serious, right? Because you're wanting to get them off on the right foot, and it just happens to be a remediation plan. So let's review. We've got the OER triad: orientation, remediation, and termination. And if you still haven't taken a 40-hour training, look for this, right? There's nobody out there vetting supervisor courses. If you're going to a supervisor training and they say they are going to teach remediation, but they don't really teach remediation, or they don't explain orientation or how to create a supervision plan, right? Because that's really what we're talking about when we talk about orientation. It's your supervision plan. Then, you've got plenty of time. Keep looking. Look for a 40-hour training that's going to teach you the process of remediation, because this is all together. Remediation isn't just this plan, okay? Remember, it's your responsibility. I can't talk. It's your responsibility to maintain and monitor the relationship between you and your supervisee. So take the time, do it right. If you have questions, ask me. And of course, you can always tag me in the Texas Supervisor Coalition Facebook group. Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses Facebook group, and I'm happy to help you out with that. All right, thank you for watching and listening. I am going to turn off the recording, so if you have questions, you can ask me. I guess I should stop the share as well. Here I go. And I'm turning off. Oh, great. Now I'm recording. That's okay. I'll get it off the Facebook page. I'm going to stop the recording. Sure you want to stop? Yes. Okay. So, yeah, so if you have questions, ask me. I'll give everybody a chance. Anybody online? All right, Clarissa, do you have any questions for me?
Hi there. Sorry, I was running late to your meeting. With the remediation plan, I just caught the tail end of that. I was just curious to see what format you had and whether it was something that needed to be reported to the board. And I'm sorry, you probably already.
No, that's a really good question because it can be confusing. So this is your call, right? If it's something egregious, right? So let me kind of take it to our level 1 supervisee. You're going to be with your level 1 supervisee through all of their firsts. And if they make mistakes, you are able to correct that, hopefully without contacting the board. Now, that's not in every case, right? But, and of course, if they do something where maybe it's not egregious, but you're like, I really do need to report this to the board, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But what the remediation plan is, it's between you and your supervisee. It's something like, I notice you keep asking that question again and again and again, and it looks like on your last evaluation, you were really struggling with reflecting content and meaning during your sessions. And I looked at the recording and you really seem to be freezing up. So ... we're going to do this remediation plan. So no, as a rule, it does not have to start or end with the board. It really just can be sort of an intense teachable moment. But as I did mention, if you get to the end of the remediation plan and they're still not getting it, and you feel like you need to terminate with that supervisee, then yeah, you might want to write a letter to the board and let them know, look, I've terminated with this person and here's why. And there is space on the upgrade paperwork because if you wanted to document their hours, right, you don't want to withhold their hours, you might even put in the documentation that this person is really struggling with X, Y, and Z.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
And I guess, do you have a general rule of thumb for yourself? Like, do you do like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing for termination, or is it really just case by case and how egregious the act is?
Well, so the remediation plan that all the Step It Uppers have in their Kate Walker training profile, it has 2. So strike 1, strike 2. And the strike 2 is, for folks who are just like, look, I tried to attend this meeting or I tried to get this CE and it's happening a week from now. And it's like, okay, look, we can be flexible. I don't have a strike 3 because, I was a teacher for so long, I'm a parent. I don't know. I think it's like, it's like 1, 2, 3 magic, really. All we really do is we look at our kids and go, 2. You know what happened before, what happens after, come on. So I don't know, maybe I'll own that. But the remediation plan in y'all's profile also is a Word document. So if that's not your style, you can always, you can do whatever you like. But one thing I do want you to stick to is making sure you have a firm completion date, making sure that these are things you can check, not just say, hey, I need you to get your notes in on time, or hey, I need you to show up. Obviously that's the outcome we want, but the remediation plan is something you need to document. They failed this, they failed this, they failed this, or accomplished it.
Yes.
Oh, and let me mention one more thing too. So let's say you had an evaluation. Let's say they did a great job on the remediation plan, and then you did another evaluation 2 months later, and they're still terrible at it, right? So you might, then you can say, look, this just isn't working out. I'm not the supervisor for you. I'm terminating you. And if they came back and said, hey, this supervisor terminated me, it affected my job, my livelihood, and I want to file a complaint, you could show the board, hey, look, I tried a remediation plan with this person. Here are the 3 evaluations that we did. Here's a record of all the times we discussed this rule and this issue. Boom, drop the mic. And really that supervisee doesn't have a leg to stand on. And on the flip, if you're a supervisee and you're like, oh my gosh, my supervisor just fired me, I don't know why. Well, now you know they should have remediated you. They should have given you an opportunity where you could show that you were starting to master those skills.
Yes.
All right.
So,
Nikita is asking, is that form in the Step It Up portal? It certainly is. Yeah, go to your the Step It Up portal, and you know everything is in the one Start Here module. When you click that, you'll see all the forms, including the Supervisor Toolkit, which has everything in it. The remediation plan, interview questions, all kinds of good stuff in there. So, yep. All right, any other questions? All right, thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next week. Oh, the rules review is next week. Never mind. I don't think we have this next week. Sign up for the rules review. Even if you're a Step It Upper, you still have to sign up. I will put the link in the thread. All right, guys, have a great day.